17. Basically, we have finished the heavy judgments. In chapter 16, the 7 angels with their little golden bowls that were filled with the wrath of God that are poured out upon the earth. And so now we're going to be focusing in on some of the things that will be transpiring during this last 7 years. And so it's not necessarily a chronological order because we've really come to the end of the judgments of God, but then we're going to have specialized judgments on chapter 17, chapter 18, specialized judgments on the false religious system that will be ruling upon the earth after the church is raptured. And then in chapter 18, God's judgment upon the commercial system of the world. And so we are just concentrating now on these two evils that have existed, the commercial and the religious systems that have more or less enslaved men. And many of you are maybe sort of enslaved by the commercial system. You have credit cards that you have a hard time making the payments, or other, the things that we get trapped in. And it's sad to see how that the oppression that can come. So when John was writing, he was on the island of Patmos. He had been exiled there by the Roman emperor at the time. And so John, in writing, uses sort of code words, so that Babylon is a code word for, in chapter 17, for Rome. And he'll sort of give you hints to the fact that it's a code word. It isn't referring to the actual city of Babylon. Now, we do know that the Tower of Babel was built shortly after the flood, and that the word Babel has come to mean, it meant gate, but it has come to mean confusion, because it was at the building of the Tower of Babel, which was a place to study the stars and a place where they were trying to reach heaven, and God confused the languages, and so it stands for confusion. And thus here in chapter 17, the confusion that does exist as a result of the religious systems of the world. And so he opens the chapter by referring to one of the 7 angels out of chapter 16 that had the golden bowls with the wrath of God. And he talked with me, John said, saying unto me, Come hither, and I will show you the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. Many waters would represent many nations of the world, and from the term whore, fornication, and so forth, these were terms that were used in the Bible to speak of religious systems that taught people to worship God in unprescribed ways. And so he is going to show him the judgment of God upon this religious system. calling it the great whore. Isaiah 57:1, it says, "The righteous perish, and no man lays it to heart. And merciful men are taken away, none considering that the righteous is taken away from the evil to come." Many see that as a reference to the true church, taken away in the rapture, taken away from the evil that is to come. And but he said, "Draw near hither, ye sons of the sorceress, the seed of the adulterer and the whore. Against whom do you sport yourselves? Against whom make ye a wide mouth and draw out the tongue? Are ye not children of transgression and the seed of falsehood, inflaming yourself with idols under every green tree, slaying the children in the valleys under the clefts of the rocks?" And of course, Isaiah is referring to the fact that Israel had turned away from God. They were worshiping the gods of the pagans. They were worshiping the god Molech, the god of pleasure. And they would, in those days, because they didn't have abortion procedures, the god of pleasure, Molech, was worshipped in sexual rites, and as the result, there were many unwanted pregnancies, or following many unwanted births. And in those days, they would build bonfires, and they would go through a religious kind of a ritual, and they would throw the unwanted babies into the bonfires. And so Isaiah is making a reference to that, and inflaming yourselves with idols under every green tree, slaying the children in the valleys, and in these bonfires. And of course, they had right there in Jerusalem, in the valley of Hinnom, the bonfires in which the children were cast as a sacrifice to the god of pleasure. Ezekiel wrote, "You have played the whore also with the Assyrians, because you were insatiable. Yea, you have played the harlot with them, and yet you could not be satisfied." Again, a reference to the adopting of the Assyrian gods and worshiping the Assyrian gods. Worship of false gods. It seems like it's always been, almost from the beginning, the worship of Molech, the god of pleasure, the worship of Mammon, the god of power, the worship of Baal, the god of the intellect, and that men have been worshiping God and offering sacrifices unto these false gods, actually, from the beginning of time. Now, God is going to bring the false religious systems into judgment here in chapter 17 of the book of Revelation. And so the false religious system that sits upon many waters or many nations, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet-colored beast, full of the names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, having introduced this woman who is sitting on the beast has 7 heads and 10 horns. In Daniel chapter 7, verse 7, he said, "After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, the 4th beast, dreadful, awesome, and strong, exceedingly strong. And it had great iron